Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Issues with Toddy One Skip, and I am Toddy One Skip. Thank you again for allowing me to be part of your day. I know how important time is and how much time we have to select things to do, and I appreciate being considered and put in that time frame. So thank you. Again, happy Hanukkah to my Jewish viewers. You get a couple more days of that, right? So I wanted to get into a series that I wanted to call Jails, Institutions, and Death. Now, that's like part of an AA slogan, Alcoholics Anonymous slogan, that you, without any kind of help, it's jails, institutions, or death. So we know what death is. We know what jails are, but we're going to talk about those. I'm going to talk about when I worked in the jails and what that's like and what I saw the inmates go through, and maybe a couple stories that I can share about my experiences there. And then we're going to talk about death and, unfortunately, the people that didn't survive this fight. Maybe we'll talk about some celebrities, and I'll talk about some people that I worked with and knew and loved, and just people whose stories should get out there. But there's no celebrity to them. Still, their stories should be told. And institutions, which is, another constructed environment in which you're told what to do, kind of jail without the bars. So institutions could be anything from mental hospitals to halfway houses to residential treatment centers. So, and we're going to talk about this one. We're going to start with the residential treatment centers. And so I worked in a residential treatment center, and it was for juveniles. And I look back on it now, and it was a good experience until it wasn't a good experience. And what happens is there's always somebody who's going to break the rules, and it's not going to be the kids that you're trying to treat. It's going to be the people that are there that are supposed to be the role models for the kids that you're trying to treat. And you see that a lot, because what happens is it turns into a business more than the purpose of it. Kind of like a cult in the sense, well, there's a lot of similarities, but in the sense that it started out, I'm sure that the residential, and the one that I'm thinking of in particular, the one that I worked at, I am sure that started out as a really good idea, and all of the purposes behind it were pure. It was about helping somebody. The person that owned the center that I worked at, he had struggled with his own addictions and supposedly was cleaning them. But here's the thing, always the thing. You can stop doing drugs, but if you don't change your way of thinking, you will continue with dope fiend behavior, which is bad behavior. And that can manifest into anything. And unfortunately, I think it manifested in the facility that I worked at with juveniles into a control ego thing. But when he originally started the program and the facility place that I worked at, it was for juveniles. There wasn't any around. And it went, some of these kids, they either were going to go to jail or into this program. A lot of the parents, on the other hand, the other ones, you had parents with some money that were like, please take care of my kid. I can't. And, they needed help with their kids. So their kids came to us, and it could be wealthy kids. It could be not wealthy kids. There was a whole diverse group of kids. Some came from money, some didn't. Some were all, races, all walks of life. Again, some were forced to be there by the law, and some were forced to be there by their parents, and some just would try to run away. But inside of this little facility that had like 40 kids, so, you know, they had a boys' side, they had a girls' side. And very few times, except in the school, when they went to school during the day, it was in this one building, and I think the boys sat up front and the girls sat behind. They couldn't even look at each other, you know. So, and just like in jail, kids figure things out, and they're always smarter than the adults, in the sense that they've got that sneaky behavior going on all the time. They're still dope fiend thinking, you know. They were still pretty clever in the way that they would exchange notes. I don't know how you could say, I'm in love with the back of your neck, but these kids were very bored when they weren't, you know, forced into groups. So having imaginative fantasies about somebody that you see that, you know, is there but you can't touch them. Like literally, the kids would leave notes inside of the stools, inside of the plastic parts of the stools, underneath the tabletops. Just again, like places that, you know, they did in jails and stuff, when, you know, just that kind of behavior. Up on door frames where people are going to leave, you know, and they might go and say, I need to go to the bathroom, and they'll, you know, just always trying to be one step ahead. And that's, you know, kids will be kids, but, you know, figuring out that stuff and finding, that would make things fun. I you know, that, I liked that challenge of trying to stay like one step ahead of the kids. Where would they, you know? And also believing that I was helping, you know. I came up with a lot of creative writing programs and a lot of discussion groups with the kids, and I enjoyed that. So anyway, but it was always fun trying to stay one step ahead. But a lot of the counselors were ex-addicts. But some of them continued on with that dope fiend behavior. And to me, it's never the kids were supposed to come with the problems, you know. But it's when you're working in the sick environment, that environment among the staff becomes very sick. And there's no place to go because you're still trying to shine hope on the kids. I'm going everywhere with this. And I don't mean to do that. I got a pretty funny memory. I got a couple stories. First of all, you got to remember that these kids, so where I worked was very rural. It was up in the mountains, and a lot of these kids came from like the city. They had neighbors that were either on top of them, above them, side by side. You could reach out and touch them. And that used to be a commercial. Anyway, they used to, that's where they came from. Some of them, you know, had never known that New York could have mountains and places where you could look and not see another person forever. So a lot of times when they were driven up, I would hear the kids talk about when they first, you know, were being driven up to where the facility was that I worked at. They'd say, man, I didn't trust that they were taking me anywhere. Like, I thought maybe they were going to get me out of the car and beat the hell out of me or something, or just drop me off in the middle of nowhere. This is literally in the middle of nowhere. So you would think that these kids might be, I don't know, a little afraid of the unknown. These kids were always trying to run away. And, like, for real, there's bears, there's animals that could eat you up. There's wildlife there. And I remember on Halloween one night, these two young girls just took off. Just grabbed their backpacks and stuff and just took off. And I went after them after having somebody take over where I was, you know, because I was running a group and they just walked off. And I went after them. You know, I could only follow them. You can't put your hands on anybody, and I wouldn't put my hands on anybody. I happened to really like these two young ladies they said to me, it's nothing against you. They were found several hours later. Because here's the thing. You're always going to show up somewhere. So what they do is they ultimately get scared because it gets dark. And when it gets dark out there, there is no light. So they knock on the first person's door. Thank God that the first person's door is a decent person. And they're not going to take advantage of two young girls who felt... I don't even think they wanted to do drugs. They just did not want to be controlled. And when they tried to speak for what they felt was fair, it went on deaf ears. Like, you shouldn't have to give up your autonomy completely to change a flaw in you. Not all of you is bad. Not all of these kids were bad. You didn't have to break down all of these kids' personality traits when they only had one or two bad traits. There wasn't a reason to break down all of the traits. And that's what they did. You broke down every kid, whether they were in there for horrible behavior and drug use, or they were in there for experimenting with drugs and getting caught and their parents just freaking out. The punishment was the same. The treatment was the same. But not everybody they're not on the same level of care. There's a difference. So there's where I have a problem with a lot of the treatment centers. It's not blanket. You can't. Because some of these kids are different than others. Again, there's drugs abusers and there's drugs addicts, and you cannot treat them the same because they're different. So I don't think that a lot of people in treatment realize that, recognize that, care about that. There's always new ways to recognize addiction and how to address it. And some old school people they don't care. It's an easy job to get burnt out from. And unfortunately, when they get burnt out, the people that suffer are the people that are in treatment. In the place where I worked, it was children. I didn't go into that. I wanted to get in there to help kids so that before they ended up in jail in the place that I worked at before, I thought, maybe I could catch him before. So anyway, you can't do it on your own. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be more people that care about it. And I think, again, that everybody goes into it, does care about it, but then they get overworked. They get abused not only by the residents, which you can understand, but then you are also getting abused in some way, shape, or form by the staff, because, again, half of them are dope fiends. With dope fiend behavior, might not be using, but the attitude's the same. You got to address the attitude. And a funny thing about these kids, and I've said this to these kids, and I'm in touch with quite a few of these kids who are no longer kids. They're in their 20s now. Some of them have kids. Some of them didn't make it. But I remember, here you got people, young adults, kids, taking horrible shit, you had heroin addicts, unfortunately. You had meth addicts. You just had, but they were very particular about what they wanted to put in their mouth and eat. That, to me, was the funniest thing. You can't be talking about preservatives to me. They'd come to eat the food, and you would hear, I'm not eating that. That's 80% ground beef and 20% what? 20% preservatives? I'm not eating that. I'm not putting that in my body. And I'm like, what? I'm like, huh? Help me understand. You'll put crap in your body. Literally, you'll put something in your veins that we already know is so toxic for you. But what? You only eat organic? So, you see what I'm saying? There were things that were funny. I mean, I found that, come on. Why are we arguing about that? But kids will be kids. And, so there was some funny stuff that you gotta, pepper in there. And obviously, a word from our sponsor. I'm the sponsor. I'm Toddy One Skip. I'm my own sponsor. So I'm going to ask you, if you like the video this far, would you consider subscribing to my channel? If you don't like the video by the end of it, you can unsubscribe. But if you do like the video by the end of it, please like and share. And if you don't like it or do like it, please talk to me in the comments. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting, but I'm my own sponsor. So besides some of the funny stuff and the stuff that I just, the kids tried to get as much independence as they can, as much control over their own life as they could. So fighting about what they would eat was just a demonstration about taking control over what they felt they could take control over. What's sad is that, the ego of that place. And ego means easing God out. So the ego of that place is what made it very cultish, like, and the whole tier system didn't help. And pulling people's behaviors and shaming people, is definitely a trait in cult behavior. And that happened too, because the kids would get humiliated because they'd be addressed in front of everybody, and that snitch behavior was definitely something that expected. It was expected. It was just sick, stuff. It was just. As I bring it up, I think more and more of, wow, how sick is that, and how much is it like a cult? They have their own language, like I use sometimes the term, I'm going to pull you up. Well, it doesn't mean I'm physically going to pull you up. It just means I'm going to help you recognize your behavior and say, listen, these are the rules. You got to do it before we get in trouble. That's a pull up, and that's the language. One of the terms that was used at the place that I worked at. And I take it with me. I still use that term today because it's just, it rolls off my tongue easy and it makes sense. Sometimes I have to explain it. Sometimes I don't. And then you have to try to get to certain levels, just like in cults, you're trying to get to a certain level of where they think you should be to deem you okay, while behaving any which way they want to without you knowing it. And then sometimes you see it. The kids used to see bad behavior from the staff and call them out on it. They'd get in trouble. Most of the bad behavior would be coming from the owner of the facility. So we put, it's kind of like, who do we trust? You put your kids in the hands of people that you hope are there for the best reasons possible. And I think they all started out for the best reasons possible, but then it turned into money and it turned into greed and such. So when I first started there, it was like a 30-day treatment center, residential, and then it turned into where it was 30, 60 to 90 days, and of course nobody left in 30 days, where they used to leave in 30 days before. And then they wanted to make it even longer term. So instead of making a new program where I worked, they just kept that program that they had, which was a 30-day program, it seemed to me, and they just made it longer, but not filling it in with anything more. Just making like the steps just along. So if the steps from getting, because I think you had to get to step 3 or step 5 to leave. So instead of it being now where you had to have 3 steps, maybe there were 5 steps now, but there were still 3 steps. They just made them into that to make the program longer. They didn't do anything to enhance the program. They didn't fill it in with anything better to enhance it with. It was just about money. It was just about keeping them. Then I also heard, and I gotta believe this because of my own personal experiences there, that they manipulated the parents' drug test. So a lot of kids that came in, unfortunately, they came in from homes where their own parents had problems. So we would drug test the parents. And sometimes I heard after the fact that they manipulated parents' drug tests so that the kids would stay longer. They couldn't go home. And I don't think it started like that. How messed up is that? Here's the best thing I could say about the facilities. So people that are sitting there saying, well, I can't put my kid through that. Well, I'm not going to put my kid through that. I have to say that while the kids were there, they weren't using. So to get your kids, that's the truth. Like, the kids weren't using. I'm not saying that the behaviors, listen, if you put a bunch of kids together that have bad behavior and they're sharing bedrooms and they're eating together and they're spending all that time together, that is going to manifest into something unless there's positive behavior going around them. But I have to say that, we found some pot sometime and we got rid of that. But definitely to get your kids away from drugs and to clear their minds. But the problem is after their minds are clear and after they've gone through realizing, okay, I don't need this. I physically don't need this. I've gotten beyond that. The behavior that's learned is like that. You have, if you don't change the behavior, you're not going to change the problem. So it's kind of like there's a saying, insanity, you know what I'm saying? Do the same thing over and over again, expect different results. That's the definition of insanity. So true. So the idea of these treatment centers is to help people not only, where I worked, was to help the kids not only be clean and stay clean, but to give them tools so that they could go out and have a brand new set of toolbox with a new set of tools to be able to deal with what life throws at them instead of taking a drug to put a bandage on what life throws at them. That's the idea of a working and responsible rehab. There's not a lot of them out there. So they do have like this cultish behavior of, well, that person's going to stay longer or that person's going to stay less or I'm going to do what I want. Everybody's going to talk in the same language. You're going to do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. And all of this is, and when somebody does something wrong, I'm going to punish everybody unless you tell me who did it. So a lot of that is cult-like behavior. So you say, nothing is perfect. There is no perfect world. There is no perfect place. I think that there are ways to do things that work out better. And we see that. We actually see that in different countries as far as drugs use and how we penalize things here. What we should be paying attention to, I don't think often we pay attention to. We often give somebody the responsibility of something that we should have taken care of. When there's a place where there's us against them, which it is, like in those rehab facilities and in jails too. It's the inmates or the kids in treatment or the residentials against the staff. And there's always going to be that friction. And unfortunately, sometimes people come into the jobs and they're not so professional, and a kid says something, and maybe that counselor just doesn't know how to let it go or doesn't know how to defuse it. A lot of times, like I said, you get a lot of people in recovery coming back to help. One, it's something that they now have a passion for, so you don't even have to pay them a lot of money. Two, it's, at that time when I worked there, things aren't like they are today. Post-COVID, I think you can get a job doing anything if you work hard enough, because there's just so many jobs out there. Where pre-COVID, you had to have some experience, and they could vet a little bit more particular, and maybe somebody with a drugs problem and a minor conviction of drugs doesn't get a job somewhere, but they get a job in a rehab center because they can have that experience. They have life experience. Here's the problem with that. There's a saying, and I think I've said it before, that you will get dirty before you will get somebody clean. They will get you dirty before you will get them clean. And that happens a lot of times in these residential centers. Because when you talk and you hear stories about drugs, and you hear, especially the kids, which are still glorifying their stories because they're kids. Kids still think they're invincible, even when they're in jail up for life sentences. I saw that myself. With the kid. With the kid. I saw that myself when I worked in the jail. But kids tend to feel like they could be excused for stuff. And many times they're not 18, but they're doing stuff that 32, they've lived lives of 40-year-old people the way that they have acted. And it's hard. You have to break them, according to, where I worked. You have to break them, which I didn't do that, to build them up. That's very cult-like too, especially by somebody who has still their own bad behavior. I'm not saying that person did drugs, but their bad behavior was seen, and when it was called on by these kids who were sober as shit, they got in trouble. So I know that this is like a discombobulated, and I keep using that word. I know that this might be very confusing in what I'm saying. But it is very confusing in how places that we look for help are. And how flawed and how broken they are. So what do I keep throwing videos out there with, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? You have to start at home, I guess, and really parent your kid. And it's hard in today's world because a lot of times people have 2 and 3 jobs, and it's just a different world. But problems are real. And the thing is, when you get kids at such a young age and they do feel like they're invincible and they don't understand, honestly, because 13, 14, 15-year-old children don't really understand the consequences of their actions. And then they're put into a facility for the first time where they have semi-independence, but not even semi-independence only in their actions that they do behind closed doors, because everything else is dictated to them. This is when you're going to eat. If you need to go to the bathroom after a certain time, you got to knock on the door because we got to let you out to go to the bathroom. You're not going to talk to this person. Nope, no phone calls. This is your program. This is your routine. And in order for that to change, your behavior has to change so that you can get to the next level to get privileges. And don't screw up once you get to the next level, because quite easy, we're going to kick you down and you're going to go back down to the first level. And it becomes a game. And a lot of times, what comes out after those kids came in there, might not be any better than when they got in there. I used to say parents messed up their kids and gave them to us to fix. That's something to think about. Anyway, guys, this is JAILS, Institutions in Death, the series that I'm doing from issues on Toddy One Skip. And I just thought it was an interesting topic. I hope that, you know, I hope you've enjoyed this, and or at least it started a way of thinking about something, and I don't know, just some discussion. So engage in the chat, that'd be great. If you'd please like and subscribe to my channel, I would like that as well. I'm still trying to find my way here. And I just thank you so much again for allowing me to be part of your day. I appreciate it. Don't forget, be better today than you were yesterday, but not half as good as you're going to be tomorrow. This is Issues with Toddy One Skip, and this is Toddy One Skip. Thanks, guys. There are so many kids with such talent, and some parents just used the place to basically throw their kids away and go away on vacation. Used us as babysitters. Those are the people that had money. And then there were legitimate kids in there that were fighting for their lives, And